Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this month's Fire Engineering and ISFSI's Hump Day Hangout. Got a few of our cast of characters here that we normally have on. So we'll start out with a little introduction. I'm Brian Zeitz, First Vice President of the International Society of Fire Service Instructors, joined by Jesse and Damon. Give a little update, fellas. Damon there, Jesse.
Jesse, I'll let Jesse.
I'll go first. I should introduce Damon because I'm Damon's biggest fan. So that being said, Jesse Marcotte, I'm the training chief of the Norfolk Township Fire Department, just outside the city of Detroit, in beautiful, balmy Michigan today, and also on the ISFSI Board of Directors.
Good afternoon, folks, fellow fire service colleagues. Damon Simmons, Oakland Fire Department, born in Michigan, however, raised in sunny California. So raised in San Jose, which is about 35, 40 minutes away from the town, as we refer to as the city of Oakland. So looking forward to today's discussion.
Absolutely. No, it's good. It's good. It's hard to believe it's December. It's crazy. This year seemed like it flew by. We're 4 months away from our annual pilgrimage to Indianapolis for FDIC. So if you have not registered for the Fire Department Instructors Conference, it's April 15th through the 20th that week. It'll be a great time. It always is. There's a great list of instructors, great classes, a lot of new classes this year, hands-on training. So make sure that you get enrolled. There's also a bunch of opportunities this year too, some new pricing. So if you have multiple members from your department that are attending the FDIC, there's opportunities there that you can save yourself some money. Depending on how people go, it's almost like a buy a few get one free type thing, which is kind of been unheard of. So definitely worth the investment in your people and your staff for this excellent training opportunity. So go to FDIC and check it out and get yourself up there and get your staff up there as well, your members of your department. So today we're going to talk about training, ISFSI, right? That would only make sense. We're going to talk about training, but what we're really going to focus on today is discussing how we can create realistic training environments for our people, and maybe do so without the conventional thought processes of maybe we don't have a training tower, right? So like in my department, we use a training tower at a neighboring department, but that's no excuse to not have training, right? So what can we do? How can we create those environments? What are some options and what are some things we can do? And hopefully at the end of this hour, one, you're a little bit more motivated to maybe go out and do that training today, tomorrow when you get back on shift. But two, you got some ideas to really improve that training and create those things. And I can guarantee you that the two gentlemen I got today are definitely going to spark your interest in some different opportunities and some ideas. So we'll start with you guys. Jesse, you want to start, how do you create realistic training for your department? What's it look like? What do you think needs to be there for that training?
Absolutely. And thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's funny that it is December and FDIC is so close, because that is one of the places that I get a lot of ideas from. By going to those classes and figuring out ways to bring that back to our organization. And our organization is probably very similar to yours, Brian, in terms of we don't have a big training facility. We have to be creative with how we do things, right? We have some very basic training props that we use. And the whole point is to be creative and to keep challenging our staff, because they work here, not just a couple months. We're hoping to keep people 20 years, 25 years, 30 years. So with that being said, I think one of the challenges we have organizationally or really fire service instructor wise is how do we maximize our resources? And being a part of the ISFSI, being able to go to a lot of those hands-on training programs that have been delivered over the last several years, seeing one skill and figuring out how we can decode that for our members in our situation, given our resource limitations. And even if you're in a bigger department like Oakland, I'm guessing not every company gets to go to the training academy every single day, right? So that being said, we like to focus on basic things. So getting really good at our equipment, how do we functionalize those? And when we go through this discussion and we take inventory of all the things that most fire stations have, whether it's a barbecue grill or an apparatus bay floor or a stairwell of some sort, we have all sorts of opportunities, potentially unbeknownst to us, to facilitate incredible training as it relates to fire suppression, ventilation, thermal imaging cameras. There's really an endless amount of resources once we get past the idea that we don't have this training facility. what can we do? How do we maximize our time? So we build everything using our resources that we have, and we try to cap it, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 60 minutes at a time, so we're not interrupted by runs. And I'm sure we'll beat up some really good stuff here in this meeting and find some fun drills.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as we go through this, we're going to talk about, like you said, how can we use that stove oven for a training prop, right? How can we use the barbecue grill? What's that stairway going to look like? What can we do? Some other things that we can do just in our own stations that we just may not have thought of. Now, Damon, he's at Oakland, and there's no funding problems in Oakland, so he never needs anything. Probably not the case, right? I mean, a big city, but there's some challenges there. So what are your thoughts, Damon?
Yeah. So first of all, are you talking about Oakland, California, or I believe there's an Oakland in Michigan, or at least an Oakland County? So, but no, yes. Whether, and my answer is short and simple, whether you have a state-of-the-art training facility that's a year or two old, or a legacy training tower that's in excess of 50 to 60 years old, the best place for training is out in your district. I can't recall the last time there was an actual fire at a training tower or training division. And that's not to say that training divisions are not a good place for training and education, because it's an excellent place. Probably no different than your organization. When we hire young men and women to come into the Oakland Fire Department, they spend their first 16 to 20 weeks at the tower. And they go through all the Firefighter 1 and 2 curriculum there, as well as some additional items that are Oakland specific. But company officers, the best place for training and education is out in your district. So if your district is a downtown with high-rise buildings and underground and above ground train stations, ports, single-family dwellings, multi-family dwelling, balloon frame construction buildings, Victorians, all that good stuff, that's where you should be spending most of your time training and engaging in educational activities.
So, Damon, you hit a nail on the head with me. And we just completed 6 days of live burn evolutions, right? So, we rotated, we're part of a training consortium at our department. So we share this, very nice training tower that neighbor department's got. We all pay into it. And the one thing that kept going away with is this training tower is new, but in 4 or 5 years, that training tower is not going to be new. And there's very limited ways to change where things are at in the training tower, right? So like first floor is a Class B propane prop. Guess what? That prop is never going to move in that tower. So in 5 years, when we do live burns, we'll do live burns every year. But I mean, in 5 years, when those guys come back to do live burns, the burn's the same spot, right? So like to your point, we never had a fire that you had to go search for in a training tower. It's not the real world. And so you're right. We got to get out in our first dues and see what's going on. One of the trainings that I implemented with our crews last year, or the year before, I forget what it was, but it was know your first due. And it was simply sent out to the companies. And it was a list of things I wanted you to do. So, it was pull a hand line to a building in your first due. It was to walk through a structure that's in your first due, both that's a commercial structure. It was to get onto a roof. Right. And I know that sounds so rudimentary. Like you're probably like, oh my gosh, get on a roof. Like, but if you think about it and we don't get a ton of fires. We're not like, burning across the world, but we do get our fair share of fires, and most of the residential, but we do get some commercial occupancies that burn. And so, if you ask your people today, like, hey, what's a spongy commercial roof feel like versus a regular roof? Would they know? And when's the last time they were actually just on a roof and saw what a roof load looks like? And that's, from the guys that are experienced on the job, those senior captains that got 25 years that are getting ready to retire, that's the paying it forward, right? In my books, is they get on those roofs with those people and say, that's an RTU. And they're like, what? That's a rooftop unit, right? Like we all know what that means, but like that's the stuff that these new guys coming on the job may not know. And those are those trainings in your first due that are just invaluable. Getting in there and seeing construction, seeing what's going on, seeing sprinkler systems. What if you look at Firefighter 1 and 2? What's one of the number one failure rates on a written? Fire suppression systems and fire alarm systems. But exactly. What's one of our most routine calls? Alarm systems, right? So
exactly.
Yeah. So I think those things are good, and I look forward to talking more about this stuff. Like I said, I get all excited. You can probably tell when I talk about these company drills, because you know what all that stuff costs? Zero, right? I mean,
Exactly.
zero. Jesse, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the stuff you do in your stations? Like you talked a little bit about the oven and that and what you can do with that. So, maybe I'm sitting there, I'm listening today, and I'm thinking, man, I'm finishing up my lunch and I'm going to go do some training with my guys. What can I do? Like, what can I do if I just got a standard fire station?
Yeah, I think, the in-district stuff obviously is invaluable. There's a ton of awesome things we can do with that. In terms of in our stations, sometimes it's difficult. People, we have reports, we have this, we have that. There's a pub ed coming in and out. So we have a finite amount of time to get something done. And I think one of the best trainings, because I believe in that concept of transferable skills and getting really good at one of the pieces of equipment we carry. And I'll use the example of a thermal imaging camera. Thermal imaging camera can be super helpful. It's not something, like we're trying to create a crutch per se, but a thermal imaging camera can do so much more than we, have traditionally given it credit for in the fire service. So one drill we ran literally last week, we ran a thermal imaging workshop. We used the fanciest training prop that we used was a propane heater that we used for fire investigations. We could also use our barbecue grill or the stove. We used an iron from, I think, like 1978 that we had laying around the station. And we ran a series of drills showing people the difference between the modes in the camera. You've got the little green triangle up there. What does that mean? And when it's in a high temperature mode or low sensitivity mode and so on. And we really we can't replicate fires everywhere we go, but what we can replicate is what we're looking for. So something like convective flow. How do we know what convective flow looks like? Understanding heat transfer. Using a propane heater, I feel like, we've used burn barrels and Class A facilities in the past. I swear a propane heater is like our best bet. It's the best way to drive home what convective flow looks like, because to the layperson, if they look through that camera, they would say, hey, there's something on fire there. That's smoke or flame, something. But really, it's just that heat, that convective heat that's coming off of that heater. The other thing that we did, which was really fun, we break these up into hot room and cold room exercises. The hot room exercise for a thermal imaging camera would involve some sort of heat source. So it doesn't need to be a 5-story burn tower. It can be our propane heater. It can be our barbecue grill or our stove. And then we break it up into cold room exercises. So understanding how to orient yourself with that camera, understanding the limitations as it relates to your sensory and depth perception. And this is exactly like everything your mother told you not to do when you were a child. But one of the best things that we've done with that is you basically use a big just a garbage bag, and that big garbage bag, you put it over your head back to the part where everything your mother told you not to do. But when you have that thermal imaging camera in that bag, you can breathe just fine. And while you can't see through the bag, your camera is able to still pick up that heat on the other side. So we just did that. We have 5 lateral recruits in. And of course, once they started walking through the station in garbage bags, everybody else had to walk through the station in the garbage bag, right? Like, what's going on in here? And it was really a fun drill because it played well into oriented search. It played well into our suppression stuff and that company officer leading that crew with their camera. And it was a lot of fun. And, again, the cost of that was free because we have garbage bags all over our station. And it really created a lot of conversation and moving the camera from one style to the other style in terms of your grip. It was a good example. We didn't use smoke. We didn't use fire. It was a fantastic training.
No, we just did some thermal imaging training too. And, I think that's one of those things, if you talk to people on the job, everybody says they know how to use a tick, right? Like, oh, it's a thermal imager. You hit the button, you turn it on, you look through it, it tells you where the fire is at, right? But are you a tactical tick operator, right? And that's the thing. And there's so many different things. We took a pallet, right? Just went up to Lowe's, got a pallet. Everybody's got a hardware store, got a pallet. They found some old flooring material they were getting rid of, and created basically a subfloor and then a carpeted floor, and then put a small hibachi grill underneath of it, and used it for our training and let everybody see, doing that whole UL test of hey, we've seen the video that the heat doesn't transfer through. It's not like X-ray vision with the tick, and that took me zero money again. About a half hour of construction, and I'm not a carpenter, and we had some great training, and we did those cold room exercises and things like that. So yeah, I think just getting creative and using what you have available. You don't have to have these big elaborate fire guns. There you go, right there, right?
Same thing, right?
You know, I mean, it's just getting out there. Damon, what are your thoughts on that? What are you doing in your stations, utilizing some of the fire station stuff?
So some of the things that we do, and I've done in the past, you know, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but now I spend my days at the Ivory Tower. And the
Nice.
Ivory Tower is City Hall, but I do teach for training. The training division is under me, and I do teach our Firefighter One Academy through our local junior college. Some of the stuff that we do, the two most recent activities, one, we took some firefighters out as well as some aspiring firefighters out, and we took it back to the basics. We did the 3-person and 4-person 40-foot wood ladder throw. And part of that, we discussed various aspects of fire suppression, kind of articulating and bringing everything all together. Part of that discussion, we talked about building construction. We discussed different ways of throws. We talked about if you work in an older city and the potential for overhead obstructions, utility lines, and the importance behind looking up, looking around when you're getting ready to throw a ladder, when you're getting ready to extend it. And we talked about modern fire behavior, all revolving around or while throwing ladders. Another activity that we done just recently completed, and part of it was a county-wide response, was we looked at the various aspects of high-rise firefighting. I tell individuals here on the West Coast, the last major high-rise fire we had that was beyond the rooming content was in 1989, but I believe the first interstate bank fire in the city of Los Angeles, in Los Angeles Fire Department. So with that being said, if you do the math, you know, out here in California, we have 1, 2, possibly 3 generations of firefighters who have never actually fought a significant fire in a high-rise structure. And we know there are some similarities to fighting a fire in a high-rise, like in a single-family dwelling and a multi-family dwelling, but we also know that there are some glaring differences between the two. Because we couldn't flow water inside of an actual occupied high-rise structure, it still did not, it still allowed us to discuss fire protection systems. It allowed us to discuss pump operations and system design pressure based on whether or not you have pressure regulating devices attached to the class standpipe systems. We talked about fire attack, talked about stairwell protection. We talked about a concept that was born out of 2 back-to-back incidents in Chicago: the Cook County the Cook County building fire and the LaSalle bank fire. And we talked about the roles and responsibilities of the rapid ascent team. So those are some of the things that we've engaged in, and moving in 2024, we're going to engage in as well, because those are things that are unique to us. Those are things that are far few and in between. And you made a comment about, you know, fires are down across the nation, which is a good thing. And I tell folks that you should never want to come to work to wish for a fire. However, when the bell goes off, it's time to go to work. Grandma, she's expecting us to come put the fire out. She's expecting us to come rescue her. If grandma's on the second or third floor and her normal means of egress is cut off, she's expecting us to be able to throw a ladder, whether we are normally assigned to an engine or not, to go up there and get her. So those are just a few of the things that we do, absent of having, well, purposely staying away from a drill tower, because as I just mentioned previously, that is not where we're going to throw ladders. That is not where we're going to do search operations. That is not where we're going to stretch hose lines to commence fire attack operations.
No, I love it. You know, like I said, I always say there's like 2 things that every firefighter should know how to do. It should be how to pull and deploy hose lines and ladders. You know, I mean, that's just the fundamental aspects. It's you know, like a carpenter with a hammer. You know, they should know how to use that thing for multiple different whatever they need to do, right? I mean, that's the tools of their trade. Hoses and ladders are the most fundamental tools of our trade, and we should definitely be proficient at it.
And Brian, as you mentioned, that hose and ladders, that, you know, that brings back memories of 20-some years ago when I went through my second academy. It was definitely not a Firefighter One Academy. It was in the city of Oakland. And for 20 weeks, that's all we did every day, with the exception, I think, maybe 2 days of EMS.
Hose and
ladders and hose. That's all we did.
You got good at it
every
though,
day.
right?
Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
still use those same commands from 25 years ago today. But yes, as you mentioned, those basics. And those are the things that are killing us.
Yeah.
And you company officers that are listening, it's your responsibility to make sure the men and women who are working with you on your crew are properly trained and educated. And Brian, I think either you or Jesse mentioned something earlier. You talked about, yes, we have busy days, whether it's EMS calls, other related items. But the philosophy that I subscribe to, and I ask company officers to subscribe to, is called 222. And what 222 means, 2 plus 22 is 24 hours. I know some of you worked 48-hour shifts, but 222. I used to tell my firefighters, give me 2 hours and I'll give you 22. And those 2 hours, training and education. And then the citizens, they have access to those 24 hours if they need us for an EMS call, hazmat call, or a structure fire call. 222. None of us work for an organization and work in a station where we cannot carve out 2 hours a day for something that's affiliated with training and education.
I like that, the 222 rule. I've heard you say it before. So it's, and it makes so much sense, right? I mean, like, you should be going into the job, to your point, expecting a fire that day. And you should be going in with the expectation that I'm going to do something today to make myself better for the community I serve, as well as the firefighters that are on the line with me. I had some captains come to me, just different things we've done. And they're like, oh, guys are complaining about this. And I just challenged them. I said, I've never heard a firefighter complain while they're on the truck, right? Like, it's rare to hear somebody complain while they're riding backwards or they're in gear. They might complain about it when they get there. They might complain about it while they're whatever. But get out there and train. One of the drills that I love doing is just the simple hose deployment drills. Where in my area, in the St. Louis County region, we rely heavily on automatic aid. So we have automatic aid companies coming from other departments and districts on any of our working structure fires. So it's not uncommon for our first and second due to be from two different departments. And so, running those drills, at different areas, we'll just go to the park, up to our local city park where we have a hydrant, and we'll just practice the first and second due, and we'll have them deployed to a bathroom. And, so the first company comes in, gives a size up. Maybe I'll get a little creative and put something up with an iPad with a simulation or something of the building being on fire. They give a size up, they deploy the hose. Second company comes in, makes the water supply connection to them, and then assists with that first line. And that's kind of our SOG for our region, right? So then go through the drill. We got a hose line off. They got their gear on. They got their SCBA on. They're functioning as firefighters. Okay, get the line flowing water. We got the pump pressures correct. We got the connections between the two trucks. Break it all down, reset, and then flip rolls. All in all, it was probably a little over an hour and a half total training time with the two companies. But the value that those companies got out of that training, because they've interoperated together, they probably, cracked some jokes between each other. They learned what works between the two trucks. They got a hose line off the truck, right? So, that's the stuff. And again, what did that cost? Zero, right? A little bit of water, maybe you got to go through your water department or something like that. We just let our water department know they're really, really good with us, working with us with the water. But, and you just got out there. And so you re-engage them in the aspect of, hey, listen, if we get a fire today, now you're ready to deploy a line, what's going on, and so just simple things like that are great and easy to do.
Yeah.
Thoughts,
Get out there and flow water. Get out there and flow water. I have yet to hear of a company officer or a chief officer to receive a bill from the local water department, in my case, East Bay Mud, because we were out there flowing water. Now, if you're in a drought, that might be slightly different. That may not necessarily look good to the public. But on the same token, when I put my private citizen hat on and I see firefighters out there flowing water, given that we were in a drought recently, I'm like, yes, that's what we need to do. Now, you also made mention of mutual aid. There are very, very few fire departments in the United States that if they have a large-scale incident, they can handle it on their own. Get out there with your neighboring fire departments. Now, I know of a city, and I'm not going to name that city, where they have a town within that city. And I'm going to give it away. We've never done any training and education with that. And that's our fault. When I say our fault, I'm not talking about the fire chiefs of the two cities. That is our fault as lower level chief officers and company officers. Get out there with those neighboring departments. And like you say, Brian, it's not going to cost us anything. I have yet to receive a bill because we went over to the neighboring city and did some training, and we burned up 5 gallons of diesel or 10 gallons of diesel. And then last but not least, we do not need SOGs for everything.
What?
Once
You mean
again, we do not need SOGs for everything. Let's go back to the basics. Brian, you're at station 1. Jesse, you're at station 2. I'm at station 3. We got a target hazard that we're all the first due on. Let's call each other up shift before. Hey, let's meet over at X and X address at 1400 hours, and let's discuss how we would handle a fire at this incident, how we would discuss a hazmat incident at this address. Don't need a SOG, folks. SOGs take forever to create. They go through a process. The union has to take a look at it. A committee has to take a look at it. Depending on what the SOG is, the city attorney, he or she has to take a look at it. Then a fire chief has to sign it off.
Yeah.
Get out there and have conversations.
Well, and just Jesse, I'm coming right to you, but just to dovetail right onto that, Damon, getting out from behind those fire station doors. We talk a lot about public education, public relations, and the proper, like, hey, we got to give a safety talk. You want to give a true safety talk. You're out in your public as firefighters with your companies, talking to your business owners about the hazards in their building. They now know that you're committed to their safety because they've talked to you, they see you. It's not a formal inspection process that you're doing as maybe your annual company inspections. You're getting out there, and when they come out and they say, what are you doing here? Be like, I'm just making sure that if something ever happens in this building, we got your back. We're taking care of you. We know how to get lines in place. We know how to access your building. We know your fire alarm systems. We know your sprinkler systems. We know all those things about this building. That is a win for the community. It's a win for firefighter safety, and it's a win for training all the way around. Jesse, what do you got?
I was going to touch on those basic skills too. So like water in, water out. So are we good at the basics? So if we're a department that has hydrants and a full water supply, are we good at hitting those hydrants? Again, fire stations that are in hydranted areas, most fire stations have a fire hydrant right in the back, right, or right in the front. So we did training yesterday on water supply, and it, unknowingly we did a lot of the stuff we're talking about here today. So yesterday we did our water supply training. We focused on the basics. We started in the classroom, talked about forward lays, reverse lays, split lays. We're in a unique situation. So we have part of our township is more urban/suburban. We're on our borders, and then we go all the way to rural, where the west side of our community has no hydrants. So we pulled up Google Maps, put it on the overhead projector in our classroom, but we didn't pull the screen down. We just wrote on the whiteboard. So we put the trucks on there. First arriving, what does a forward lay look like at this address? What does a reverse lay look at this address? We have an extended setback. How are we going to use a split lay here? So we walked and talked through the whole thing. No PowerPoints. It was all real properties in our first new area. And then we went out back. We simulated all of those hose loads. And we didn't, even though that split lay concept we were talking about, our stretches could be well over 1,000 feet or however long they're going to be. We used 125 feet of hose from the storage room. So we didn't have to take any trucks out of service, but we did a full rural water supply, everything from urban water supply to suburban to rural. And it took us 125 feet of hose to make that work. And practicing the hydrant changeovers, all those basic things of pump operations, just getting our hands back on the levers, being comfortable, tank to pump, tank fill. And it was perfect. So we had it broken into 2 groups, the pump operator of the relay engine, pump operator of the attack engine. And everybody got a little bit of hands-on experience and felt the pressure of doing that changeover while they're going from tank water to hydrant water. And those sorts of things set the stage for when we go out there and we go up to that strip mall or that hotel or that house, and we talk about what those first 5 minutes look like. And as the first arriving engine, what are your critical factors? And as the second arriving engine, what are your critical factors? And, we have a lot of good discussion doing that. We have a lot of fun and we learn a lot.
No, I totally agree. I'm a huge guy on the basics, and I often say the basics are the basics, but the basics aren't easy, and that's how we get the fundamentals. And there's props out there. I'm not going to knock, like I said, training towers. I'd love to have one. We don't have one. We have we have a door prop. And then that's a great simulation, right? So if you have a door prop, but I can attest, like we bought the door prop, and like the first month, it's like the new toy or whatever. It's great to play with and stuff. And then all of a sudden something else came along. And so the door prop just sits there. And so, make sure if you got a door prop, rotate through, go use that. If you have a training tower, go use your training tower, get your ladders out. Like you said, if you have access to these things, utilize them. But, today we're talking about if you don't, right? So what are those options if you don't? I'll tell a funny story. So, back when I was a firefighter, we had the station I was at, we had a boat. And so, you can imagine what a bunch of firefighters want to do when it's, sunny day and we have a river. Let's take the boat out, Cap. And we all know what's the story when we take a boat out, right? No boat goes on the water without paperwork and repairs, And so we were on this captain, and he's a great guy. He's retired now. But, we just kept hopping on him, like, hey, can we take the boat? Take the boat. So, yeah, we're doing boat training today. And so we're like, oh, man. So immediately we all run into the locker rooms. We're grabbing shorts because we're going to be on the river. And he said, we're going to get that boat in the water as soon as all of you can back that trailer around the training tower. This was my former department. And so, of course, we're like, wait, what? And so it goes back to that fundamental skill, right? Like, like we got a UTV at my department. And so, the UTV is attached to a brush truck. It's on a trailer. And so, yeah, everyone wants to go on the UTV and take it on the trails because that's a lot of fun. But it's just as much fundamentally knowing how the UTV works and how it pumps and, the payload's capacity if we have to put a patient on there and things like that, as it is to operate that truck and that trailer, to be able to back it into tight spaces, to be able to turn it around in parking lots that are very narrow at the parks and things like that. So, if you have some equipment like that too at your station, don't neglect that as good company level training. Again, zero cost, right? So like not everything has to be some, like, oh man, this is going to take me a lot. It's like, hey guys, at any point in time, if I got 4 or 5 people at my station, any point in time we get deployed and we have to take this UTV, this boat, air cascade. I mean, in today's fire service, there's all kinds of superfluous extra equipment at stations, right? We all got something. It's a trailer or something. Are we good at backing those things up? Do we understand what the commands are, what it looks like, and how to do it safely so that we, one, don't wreck the apparatus, but two, we don't run somebody over either, right? So again, simple things. It doesn't have to be overly complex.
Correct. And for you company officers out there now that are listening to this Hump Day Hangout, and everything that Jesse and Brian just mentioned in regards to training and education, you have those resources right there next to you, down the street from you. You don't need a state-of-the-art training and educational facility to deliver real-world training for the men and women who work under you. And I tell this story. I sent off a notification to my fire chief and some other folks a few days ago. Unfortunately, it dealt around a couple line of duty deaths in the nation. And one of the quote came from the IAFF General President, Ed Kelly, and he was mentioning to the incident on the East Coast where 2 firefighters died, and the department, of course, it was stated that the department did not provide adequate training for those members in that organization for that specific type of incident. And I'm not here to defame or put any blame on any fire department in the United States, because I genuinely believe when we come to work each and every day and we put our uniform on, we are there to serve and we are there with good intentions. Company officers, you have to make sure your people are properly trained and educated, and start with stuff that is in your district. Start with stuff that's in your second district. Brian made mention of a boat. A lot of us work in cities that are landlocked. You don't have a boat, so don't focus on boat operations. If you work in a city where you have a lot of mid-rise buildings, a lot of multifamily dwelling structures that may require you to deploy a dead load in all instances because that pre-connect or that hotline won't work, get out there and stretch those lines. And Brian, you made mention about when you're out there in your district doing training. What I found is when we come in contact with people and they ask, what are we doing? Or even apprehensive business owners, after you explain to them, as you just mentioned, that, hey, we're out here making sure we're properly trained and educated. So if there is an emergency at 2:00 in the afternoon at your location, or 2:00 in the morning at this same location, we're ready. And their eyes light up. And typically what they'll say is thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we have to do. We can't hang out in the fire stations all day, and the only time we go out is for a coffee run or go shopping for lunch and dinner or go on a run. Get out there in your district, company officers. You have important responsibilities, and your responsibilities, if you were to put a dollar amount on them, are in excess of $1 million, and for some of us, $1 billion. You are responsible for a response district that's comprised of buildings and structures. You're responsible for 2 or 3 other firefighters that are working with you. You're responsible for a fire station, and you're responsible for 1 or more fire apparatuses. That's why you get paid additional monies, because you have additional responsibilities that no dollar amount can come close to waiving those rights, for lack of better terms.
Yeah, we just had some promotional exams at our department, and that came up, and I kind of said that. I'm like, as the firefighter, you're responsible for yourself. As the company officer, you're 4 or 5. As a battalion chief, you got 17. I'm responsible for 54. And there's days that I'm like, man, this is great. And there's days I got to take and be like, okay, this was a near, it was close, right? And so, that's what you're getting compensated for, is that accountability and what you're willing to be accountable for. I completely agree, right? I've always said the most important role in the fire service is that company officer, and they really can make or break a department. And so if you're the company officer, people want to be led, people want to be challenged. So, you saying, well, if I make them do training, they're going to not like me. And it's not a popularity contest. You were given roles and responsibilities for a reason. So execute on those. Damon said it there, but right now, and I know Damon's a USAR guy as well. I love the USAR stuff. I love the ropes and knots and the building collapse stuff and all that stuff. But, ask yourself this as your department, do you have firefighters on your job that could build a raker shore but couldn't deploy a hose line? And I'm not knocking anybody, right? Because we probably all got them. And so they could build a raker shore and tell you the angles of everything and how many nails are in every plate and everything like that. But the likelihood of us getting a structural collapse versus a fire, right? So play to your odds, and that's a big deal. Simple trainings, like I said, do what you're going to likely have. I'm not knocking USAR training. Like I said, I love it, but that shouldn't be every day. And I see companies out there every day doing USAR training that haven't done a buddy breathing drill. Again, you want something simple. Hey, this morning, everybody put your gear on. Everybody put your STBA on. I want everybody breathing, for 5 minutes of air. Let's just see what 5 minutes of air looks like. All right, everybody make a connection. All right, let's get the RIT bag out. All right, let's look at what a RIT connection looks like if I have to connect up. All right, at 2:00 this afternoon, we're going to go to XYZ Fire Department. We got A SCBAs. They got B-type SCBAs. We're going to see what our RIT connections look like if I have to make a RIT connection, if they have to make a RIT connection to us, right? So again, a zero-cost training, maybe a little bit of time, driving between the departments, but for the most part, it's very minimal, in terms of cost. We're gaining interoperability because, like Damon said, none of us are really handling alarms by ourselves. And do we know if I got, I would certainly want that other department to know how to connect to my SCBA, and that's a critical function. Think about the tools on your truck, saws. Steve Shaw was supposed to be on here. He would love to talk about saws, right? It's a saw guy. He would be so happy me talking about it. But I go back to we had a USAR training and we did ring saws, and all of us thought we were going to be cutting concrete, and literally we didn't touch one piece of concrete. We took the saw completely apart, cleaned it, and put it back together. Can your members change a blade on a rotary saw? Can they change a chain and tension a chain on a chainsaw? Do they know the fuel mixes? all those things, right? Simple stuff, right? It's just simple stuff, but it's that every day doing something with your company that's going to make them more proficient and safer on the fire ground. Jesse, what do you got? What are you thinking?
It's funny because as I listen, there's really an infinite amount of information that we can train on, right? There's an infinite amount of knowledge, skills, and abilities that we can hit on, from small engines. They're doing vehicle education today. So at vehicle education, we work with either the local towing provider, or we're very fortunate being in Metro Detroit to work with some really phenomenal programs. We get essentially brand new vehicles, all the latest and greatest technology for little to no cost, right? So that's one thing. But even like we train on building utilities this week. We did the walk around our station, our gas meter, electrical meter. We opened the breaker box, lockout, tag out, all the gas valves in the mechanical room. Very basic stuff. But one thing I want to touch on too is the idea of integrating technology into our training. So Damon made a comment, we don't need state-of-the-art training facilities to produce high-quality, relevant training to our staff. We don't need the latest and greatest in virtual reality or augmented reality or all these other things to integrate technology into our training. And I'll use a couple of examples. One would be different online providers, right? So one of the best classes I went to at FDIC was several years ago, and it was John Cirillo and some other folks associated with Underwriters Laboratories, and they did this exercise called Playing Fast. And Playing Fast, we were just taking images basically that we could find on the internet of various fires in different places, and we used it for discussion. So that was the exercise they led, and the questions, there were only 3 questions. Looking at this very static image, are there savable lives and or property, yes or no? Are you offensive or defensive, and where are you applying water first? So we'll use that as a foundation for a lot of drills. We'll pull up some photos, we'll hit it quick, right? This Playing Fast concept, and then we'll go into our other drill. First due, Zillow. So believe it or not, it gets a little bit chilly here in Metro Detroit. So when it's 6 degrees out, it's hard to go out and flow water sometimes because we're going to make an outdoor hockey game, a pond hockey game on accident. But we can challenge ourselves with some fun things. So everybody could pull out their phone, or we could get a computer, do it together, and work through different things. Zillow is fantastic. At any given time in our first due district, we could have a house that's 1,000 square feet that's for sale. We could have a house that's 20,000 square feet that's for sale. So it allows us to walk through some of these buildings without even, we can't just show up at the average person's door and ask to walk through. But when we see the differences in just one neighbor to the next and how different the construction can be, it gives us a really good idea of what we can expect when we do get an alarm at that address or a similar address. So just using existing resources, Realtor.com, Zillow, our township's assessing site, right? There's a ton of information at our fingertips that we don't need to have a dissertation on, but it's relevant because we're looking at the exact properties that we're going to be called to respond to, or we're expected to respond to.
Okay. And Brian, if I can interject for a second on Jesse's point there with going online and using images. Another 2 types of activities you can do with that is to take images of buildings and buildings on fire from across the nation and discuss hose line selection. At this fire, as a company officer, are you going to have your firefighter stretch an inch and a half, or inch and 3/4, or 2 1/4, or 2.5 inch hose line at this incident? And then also chief officers have conversations with your company officers at the same types of exercise about command and control, especially command and control for the first in company officer. Some of us work in organizations where that first in company officer, he or she is in command for the duration of the incident. Others of us work in organizations where that company officer, he or she is going to be in command about 5 or 10 minutes, and then the chief officer is going to arrive and assume command. Nevertheless, we have to continue maintaining a high level of competency with command and control. Because when you look at the NIOSH 5, that's one of the contributing factors. Yes, I tell folks all the time, ICS does not put out a fire. It was not designed to. It's a management tool to manage the people and all the resources at an incident. So that, coupled with the hands-on stuff, ladder ops or truck operations, engine ops, deploying hose lines, and everything else that's part of that Firefighter 1 and 2 curriculum, everything else that is associated with our first due and our second due. Company officers, those are the things you need to have a plan for each shift, and you need to execute on each shift.
So so to your point, Tamai, I completely agree. And so we had the department we did live burns at. They made a little prop out of some old lumber. And so one of the fires that we start to see more of, I guess you might say, in this area, come wintertime, is garage fires. Just for whatever reason, just more stuff's happening in your garages and things like that. And so one of the tactics that we employ a lot of times is to quick hit with the deck gun and deploy a line. And I don't know about you two, but I've been on several fires, plenty that have seen the deck gun used, and the deck gun emptied the tank of water, and we either filled the backyard, missed the target, had zero effect on the fire. And so, if you're looking for another drill, this neighboring department built a garage simulator out of basically a 7-foot tall, 20-foot wide box, put it on some little stable footings. I bet you they got less than $100 in lumber in this thing, and it's the target now for their deck gun operations. And so they just set this thing up, and the goal is that as the deck gun operator, whether it's remotely operated or manually operated from the top of the truck, is that they can how quickly can they get water flowing onto that fire, and how effectively can they use that tank water to start extinguishment of that garage fire, right? And so, you think about it, like, we how many times do we just go out and, we're going to do pump training, and what's the easiest way to do pump training? We'll connect to a hydrant, we'll go through the pump operator training on the pump, and we'll just flow the deck gun or whatever, because then we don't have to have any lines off the truck and things like that. We'll incorporate now targeting with it, right? So if I want to use that, or I want to use the aerial, don't just put the aerial all the way up and flow from 100 feet. How low can I get the aerial? How can I pivot my tip if I have to get into a window front? What's my offset have to be? What's the advantages of, different things, and especially when we're starting looking at different apparatus, can I flow up and out from a building, or do I have to flow down and in? And what does that look like and stuff? And those are all tactics that are going to improve your firefighting ability at the company level, right? No fire chief's going to come in and say, hey, I wonder, can that ladder, they want to see the company officer that knows his truck. You should be intimately familiar with that apparatus and the functionality of it and what it can and cannot do. And so, when you're arriving as an incident commander or late arriving admin officer or whatever, right, and you see these apparatus and positions that are functional, that tells you that company officer are well trained and that they know what they're doing. And so that only comes through getting out, doing the training, I'll say right now, like we've been talking for almost an hour. And so far, I think we've spent $20 maybe in some fuel, and we've probably created an entire year's worth of training. I mean, I hate to say that, but right. I mean, it's that forcing us to get out and do the things that we know we should be doing. And we know we can do. It's just actually getting out and actually doing it.
Yeah, it's funny because think of how long fire hose has been around, right? Or nozzles in general, but they're both things that we could learn more about, right? And we might surprise ourselves in some instances how little we know about the things that we carry. So even a simple discussion, we get the nozzles out. So if we have an automatic nozzle and a smoothbore nozzle, we generate some good discussion, right? Who's in this group? Who's in that group? Why? Oh, this droplet size or penetration or whatever the concept is. Then we walk through each nozzle, the pros, the cons, and at the end of the day, come back to we could do anything we're called to do with either one of these nozzles, but we have to know how to use it. So you have to know the difference between the ball valve and the slide valve and why that's important. And just showing somebody what that looks like. I was looking because I usually have like random nozzles just sitting on my desk. But to be able to show somebody what we're talking about when we talk about debris passage and the benefit of one nozzle over another, or when we're trying to talk about the benefits of stream quality and why an automatic nozzle might be better in certain situations. So getting back to just basic stuff, it goes back to conversation. It relies on people in the crew to be present and have some ownership in what we're talking about. And I feel like a lot of times those are the best trainings, the things that we do right in the apparatus bay with one another. We don't have to have any crazy elaborate plans or an entire manual of SOPs and SOGs, as Damon said. It's just the crew sharing their experiences and the things that they've seen, whether that's on through their own experiences or something they've seen on social media. It's another great source of things to talk about. But yeah, I feel like those are typically the best trainings and some of the trainings that I personally learn the most from.
I was gonna say, one of the things that's great to get out there with your thing is, ask your company right now, if you're a company officer, what's the breakover point for your stream? We should all know that, right? I mean, we should know, and you can theoretically push it out there all you want, like, oh, the breakover point's X, but until you flow and you realize, the plumbing on this truck is a little bit different and the pump pressures and things, but what's that breakover point? What point inside that building can I start flowing water that's going to start having a positive effect? And then time your tank. How long is that tank going to last me? Again, we can theorize it all we want and say, well, at a 500-gallon tank at 125 gallons a minute, it's going to do X. But we all know that the theory versus what you really get are two different things before the pump operator is going to start shutting you down until you're out of water. So, again, simple drills that's good to know. How much air does your SCBA last for each guy? Hey, let's get our SCBAs on. We're just going to do some light calisthenic exercises, walking, crawling, set up some different things. You get your physical fitness out for the day. You got everybody in gear. I always say it's a win. When people are in gear, people are in SCBA, it's a win for the day for training. So, get them out there, get them doing something. Set up, if you got 5 people, set up 5 different little things. Every 5 minutes you switch. Maybe one's crawling around. Maybe one's climbing up and down a ladder. Maybe one's pulling something. I don't know. Get creative. I guarantee you got the stuff in your station to do something like this. Time your tanks. How long does it last? And then once you get to that benchmark where you're starting to go low on air, have that person go into recovery mode, call the Mayday, right? Because they're out of air, they're stuck in the building. Have them verbalize what it sounds like to do a Mayday, and then start having them conserve their breathing and see how long that lasts them. Valuable information that you as the company officer definitely want to have on your people, but you definitely want your people to also know about themselves, right? So again, none of this stuff is costly. It's easily done. And it engages your firefighters in the fact that, guess what, today at the firehouse, you're actually going to maybe have to be a firefighter. And I think sometimes we fail to see that. Damon said the 222 rule. Give me 2 hours of quality training, because the next 22 hours, the citizens, or the whole 24 hours, I should say, the citizens are dependent on you to actually operate like you need to. I think you're muted, Damon. No, maybe not. Do we lose Damon's sound? You there? Got nothing. We'll try.
I'll throw another thing out there while we're waiting for Damon's sound is, we're talking a lot about the importance of the company officer, and that's fantastic because a lot of these decisions are going to live and die with that company officer. And, when we're talking about standpipe operations, whether that's mid-rise, high-rise, something else, big box store, the standpipe operations, in a lot of instances, we don't even need to go there, hook to the standpipe and flow the water at the occupied structure. But maybe what we do is, as a company officer, I ask the crew, hey, we're going to use this building in our district as our plan for today. We're going to walk through everything we're thinking of, and we're going to use the idea that we're going to attach to a standpipe. So let's grab everything we need to facilitate a standpipe operation right now. What are the things we're thinking of? What issues could we encounter? What if our hose stretch isn't long enough? Like, we could walk through so many cool, important things in our apparatus bay without ever leaving the station, making it to the point where we are able to leave the station. We're just that much better. I mean, we're just like, now when people do get that opportunity to get out and about, they're that much happier to be going out and taking the stuff we've been working on at the station and applying it in some practical or functional context, which is awesome.
Damon's back.
Oh, can you guys hear me now?
Absolutely. It's good to have you back.
Brian, you were talking about getting out there stretching line. Whether it's stretching, going back to the basics, whether it's stretching lines or throwing ladders. I doubt any fire truck out there has a coin box on there. Like, when you go to the airport and baggage claim, and you got a bunch of bags, and so you need a cart, you got to pay $1. It was probably more than $1 now. I'm dating myself, a couple bucks. But my point is, you're out there coming from the coffee shop, going shopping, coming from shopping. You're out there cruising around the lake, doing your district survey, and you come across buildings. Stop the fire truck and talk about lateral throw, especially those tricky buildings, those buildings that are in between, that are maybe 3 feet, 3 stories in height, 4 stories in height. And instead of saying, hey, I think a 35 or a 40 will reach this building, pull the ladder out. Put your helmet and gloves on, pull the ladder out, throw the ladder, discuss ladder operations, discuss ladder throws, and put in there discussing ventilation. And if there is a unusual door, say it's a commercial structure, discuss forcible entry all at the same time. And once again, we're getting company officers, we're getting back to it. It does not cost you anything financially. The fire chief is not going to have you come up to his or her office the next morning in your class A, and because you're getting in trouble for getting out there training your folks. And speaking of fire chiefs, that's not the fire chief's responsibility to make sure that the people at the company level are properly trained and educated. Yes, it's part of their responsibility to make sure we have the resources to do our job. But when it comes to training and education, company officers and battalion chiefs, that is your responsibility. That is our responsibility. Not the fire chief, not the mayor, not the union president, not the elected officials, you and us.
Yes, and I will reiterate that to Damon. If you have a training officer in your department, that training officer is responsible for training to a certain degree for the month and things like that, but they are not responsible to train the department. That's a company level. That's a reason why instructor is put into the NFPA standards for fire officer. You need to be out there as the company officers, battalion chiefs, shift personnel. That is your responsibility to impart that knowledge and skills and ensure that your company is able to operate at a high level. That is 100%. Fellows, we are almost to the end of this, and I want to take an opportunity to let you guys have some final thoughts. So, Jesse, we'll start with you. Final thoughts for this conversation today.
Yeah, my final thoughts are, we can't let the fact that we either don't have a training facility or can't be in a training facility every day be our excuse as it relates to not getting out and being good at our core functions. So whether it's stuff that has to do with air and ventilation or water and suppression or forcible entry or ground ladders, those are all our core tenets as members of the fire service. We need to be good at all those things. And I think collectively we should challenge ourselves to find these creative ways to hear what our staff wants to train on, and then to connect those dots for them and help facilitate all of that training. And something like this, my mind is going like 1,000 miles per hour of all the things that we can do or should do. And the idea that when we're doing the training, we just want to do it right and functionalize that, whether that's throwing a ground ladder or whether that's sliding around on the apparatus bay floor and practicing those techniques that we're going to be using when we're stretching, when we're advancing lines. We can't use it as an excuse or a crutch that we don't have the training facility. Our fires, medicals, car accidents, those things are not going away just because we don't have a training facility. So the challenge is really back to ourselves to hold ourselves to that standard that we would expect of somebody who's responding to our house if we have an emergency. So the only way we build that competence and confidence is through our training. So challenge yourself to find new ways to continue to maintain and build new skills.
Damon, I'll say this. I'm going to go to you. I feel like we could talk about this for the next 4 hours between the three of us and never talk about it twice. Damon, final thoughts.
Yes, company officers out there, training officers, continue doing great things for you and your organization, as well as the citizens, and continue being students of the profession. And company officers train on everything from structure fires, hazmat, EMS, engine company operations, truck company operations, fire behavior, RIT, high rise, and everything else that we may be called out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to respond to, or 3 o'clock in the morning to respond to. Thank you for listening.
No, I thank you guys. It's always, I look forward to this every other month. You guys, talking and just discussing things and getting perspectives and just getting my brain wrapped around like new ideas and things I can be doing. We talked a lot today about different ways you can do training at the company level. We talked about how you can do this without the training tower. Not every department, not everybody's budget can afford a lot of intricate props. So hopefully today we inspired you, challenged you, got some ideas for you to do some realistic training. I'd be remiss to not say don't check out. Please do go check out fireengineering.com. If you're not subscribing through the magazine, it's an excellent resource for training. There's all kinds of articles and things on there. The fire engineering website, there, Demon's showcasing it right there. You know, that's a whole month of training wrapped up in a magazine for you, and you could pull that together with just no problem. Fire engineering, in my opinion, should be in every firehouse across America. That copy that magazine, because it's going to inspire something for that training for that day. Fireengineering.com, again, another great website to check out for the online content and the access to that. And of course, FDIC is just going to be here in 4 months, so we will be there. ISFSI will be on the ground. Come check us out at our booth. Booth will be open Wednesday through Saturday. We will have our social. So if you're a member, invites will be going out soon. So our social will begin Tuesday night. So we'd love to see everybody at the social on Tuesday night. And then we will have our general meeting on Friday, where we'll be unveiling a lot of new things coming for ISFSI. So it's definitely an exciting time. If you're in the fire service and you do any type of instruction, which everybody in the fire service does, I would ask you to join isfsi.org. Check it out. Join. Again, we offer different memberships for whether you're to join as a department, join as an individual, large, small, doesn't matter. We'd love to have you. And so it would be great. So thanks everybody for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you in a couple of months. Stay safe, and we'll see you at FDIC 2024. Thanks, guys.